Hey there, folks. It's time for this week's Jungle Drums on my own again this week. Don't worry about it, though. We'll definitely try to get the gang back together here in the near future. Just once again, schedules and whatnot, and me being busy with schoolwork. Right, so hey, this last week there's been all sorts of, bits and bobs popping up, all sorts of different types of news. Quite a few pieces of news obviously are available on scholarlygamers.com, which you can read up on some of the things that have popped up this week. But there's also a lot of other, bits of information when it comes to games and leaks and whatnot. And this is absolutely normal in the lead up to E3. This happens every year. We always, get little teasers and little bits of information. Saw a really good one the other day, which is actually fake, but is the proposed itinerary for the Sony E3 conference. But it's not legit at all. Before we get into all the kind of E3 stuff, and, we're not going to discuss too much about E3. We'll wait till next week to get into that. I wanted to talk about the GDPR, which of course is the General Data Protection Regulation. Now, if you're connected to the internet, you already know that you have been bombarded with all sorts of emails regarding updates, the changes to privacy policy and whatnot. And it's honestly quite hilarious because the GDPR was adopted, back in April 2016, but it didn't become enforceable until the 25th of May this year. But companies have had, 2 years to, ensure compliance and to put all of these things into place. But typical, businesses wait until the last minute, and that is why you've been bombarded in the last week or two. Now, it's quite funny because obviously over here in Europe, most countries already have legislation in place. Like the UK, for example, we have the Data Protection Act of 2018. We had one that was older, but it just got, beefed up a little bit more. And of course, with the UK slated to leave the EU, GDPR, wouldn't. It still applies to us because we would obviously be dealing with people and businesses in the EU. But, it's one of these things that people are like, oh my God, this GDPR, it changes everything. No, it doesn't really. Most countries already have legislation in place that was doing all of these same things. The difference is with the GDPR is the hefty fines that can come your way, if you're in violation. I mean, it's crazy. A fine up to 10 million euros or 2% of the annual worldwide turnover, for a company or an enterprise, whichever is greater. So just think about that. The minimum fine's 10 million euros, but for these really large, profitable organizations, it's going to be 2% of their worldwide turnover from the last financial year. Pretty crazy. That's if there's been an infringement of, these different articles, right? So that's one tier. But then there's another tier that's a fine up to 20 million euros or 4% of the turnover. If, they've done these other non-compliance, basically, processing information, the data subject's rights, if they've been violated, the transfers of personal data to a recipient in a third country or an international organization. It's pretty crazy. Now, I've seen a lot of questions online about, oh crap, what if I've got a blog? If I have a blog, do I need to ensure compliance? And it's tricky. On one hand, yes, and on one hand, no. It depends what type of data you're collecting. This is the key thing. If you have, some type of way of collecting data on people, then you need to be careful. Oh, but I'm not in Europe, you say. It doesn't matter. The GDPR applies to, the people, not just the companies. So if you have viewers, readers, customers that are in the EU, then you need to ensure compliance because it's talking about, them, the individual, their rights. So yeah, I've seen a lot of conflicting opinions in this when it comes to like WordPress blogs and whatnot. And again, it just really comes down to, ensuring you have a privacy policy, a statement. Because on WordPress is a prime example. It has the ability to you can leave comments, on blogs. And of course, WordPress by default logs the IP addresses of anyone who posts. Now, don't worry, the latest version of WordPress is GDPR compliant. So as long as you're all updated, you should be fine. And it's just making sure you've got, the privacy statement, the updated privacy policy. But it's really quite interesting. I mean, most companies out there, most organizations, they were in compliance anyway. It was just making sure that these emails went out to let people know. It's going to take a little bit of adjustment, obviously, because you go to some websites and now you're getting spammed with all sorts. So you have to click OK. You have to give consent, and that's the key word, is consent. As you have to basically be informed that, oh, hey, look, your data or your IP address, your email, whatever is personal information about yourself, is going to be stored. We'll take care of it. And if they are going to disclose it or pass it on, they need your explicit consent. This is where some companies might get into a little bit of bother. Just recently, I bore witness to a very small startup that kind of, had it's on one hand it's a breach, but on the other hand it's so minor, it's just a small mistake. And of course, this is this new platform that's coming out called WASDR. And WASDR is a fintech, right? And that stands for financial technology. Fintech is, an aspect of the business world and the technology world that has been growing quite substantially over the last few years. And so WASDR is all about empowering gamers, right? So they're trying to create a platform for socialization and monetization for streamers, which is going to feature ways for them to network and grow their audience, right? So it's all really, really quite interesting. Looks pretty neat. How they're going to do that, how they're going to monetize, we don't know. It could be a case of peer-to-peer transactions. I think it's worth noting at this point in time that, everyone thinks that Twitch is, like the only thing for streaming. And you have to keep in mind that that's, Twitch, Mixer, we're always aimed at gamers. There's been other platforms out for years that have nothing to do with video games. I can't remember the names of them off the top of my head, but there was this one specific one that was more to do with creativity. So people, like playing music or, yes, doing their art stuff. And it had direct peer-to-peer, tipping. Instead of using a third-party service, you were tipping that broadcaster directly. And it's worth noting that those platforms that have been around for years is what gave Twitch the inspiration to, let's start creative. Because if you were an artist of some kind, you'd look at Twitch, but, that's great, I can watch video games on Twitch, but, I can't do my art stuff. Oh, look, here's this social platform where I can, and I can make money doing it. So, Twitch aren't dummies. They saw that there was a market that was already relatively, built up, and thought, well, right, we need to kind of tap into that. Same with the IRL, same with, artistic streams. Twitch is quite clever. There's a lot of streamers out there that think there's no other platforms around, but if you search around, you'll soon see that there's always been other platforms. Maybe not in the mainstream, maybe not that everyone knows about, but for these types of niche markets, they've always existed. So it's interesting to see a company like WASDR applying, the same type of concept as these other platforms, but hey, look, we're going to try to do this for gaming. So that'll be pretty neat. It could be interesting to see where they go with it. Obviously, they're in very, very early alpha. And also, they're based over here in Europe. They're actually, I believe, in Stockholm, in Sweden. and they had a tiny little blunder that it really got my attention. In their GDPR update that they sent out to their people that have subscribed to their newsletter, the early adopters, they made the mistake of sending the email directly to everyone. As in the to box, I can see hundreds of other email addresses. Now, okay, if you're into hacking and whatnot, you know yourself that having access to someone's email address doesn't automatically mean you can do anything you want, right? I mean, it's, for the most part, an email address is relatively safe. But when an email address contains that person's full name or contains the company they work for in the domain, it is a little bit of an issue. And of course, with the changes to GDPR, the big thing is consent, right? Basically, these email addresses were released to hundreds of third parties because, that's other people who were on the email without those people's consent. So whether it's a violation of the GDPR or not, well, that's not for me to make that decision. Obviously, it's on WASDR to actually notify, the regulatory commission, the authorities, of that breach. That's on them. They have 72 hours to notify, when something like that does happen. And I'm sure they have. I'm sure they've done all that. They're businessmen over in Sweden. They know what they're doing. But whether or not that'll have any kind of financial implications for them, or whether or not that'll, be a loss of confidence. I know me personally, yes, I'm not on that email list. No, that's not cool at all. But that's just me. But anyway, we'll be keeping an eye out. And, likewise, if you're looking at other websites, if you see these types of breaches or you have worries or concerns about if there has been, a violation of the GDPR, speak up, write to someone, have a look online, see if, other people have also had similar issues, because it's not good, to have personal identifiable information out there. An email address can be, relatively safe, but if you add it with other bits of information, it's no good at all. In fact, I did a video on that quite a while back, how, all that a potential hacker or, anyone, a criminal identity thief, all they need is 3 pieces of identifiable information on you, and they can do all sorts of damage. So just be careful, folks. Right, something else to be careful about is a new gaming console that is now available for pre-order. Sourced this from TechRadar.com, and this is, of course, about Atari's all-new gaming console. With the little subtitle here of "Get ready for some serious nostalgia." Right, so the retro consoles, the mini NES, the mini Super, SNES, they've been selling like hotcakes, right? They've been doing really, really well. I've been excited for the Commodore 64 remake, or at least I was, but then when I've looked at what games actually come on it, they're not necessarily the games that I would have selected, but understand why they've went that route. So it just made sense. We knew that Atari was going to be coming out with a retro console as well. They had started a campaign on Indiegogo. They had a goal of $100,000, and they raised more than 15 times that. So obviously the project was an absolute go. Now, the release date of the console isn't slated till about mid-2019, but you can pre-order it right now. The hardware itself is supposed to be capable of, it's a retro-inspired platform capable of playing both classic and modern games, with the promise of online capability as well as support for 4K resolutions. Wow, so what do you get? The design and branding look very similar to the Atari 2600, right? The console that was released back in 1977. if anything, was that, I'm sure that was the first game that used cartridges and basically inspired all other consoles at the time to do the same. The originally it was named the Atari VCS until it was rebranded in 1982, and that's when they did the different numbers for the different series of consoles. And at the time, it was a success. It was a very successful console. Atari was synonymous with gaming. That's what kids used to say. It wasn't like, oh, do you want to go play video games? It was, hey, let's go play Atari. And of course, as we know, as years progressed, this became the same thing where kids were, oh, hey, let's go play Nintendo or let's go play PlayStation, rather than, say, just, video games. So there's 2 Atari VCS models that are going to be, are now available for pre-order. One is the standard Onyx version, which is taking orders at $199 US. And then there's a classier Day One's Collector's Edition that has the genuine wood front, the very, very old original ones, and that comes in at $299 US. Both are marked as being on sale for a limited time only. Allegedly, these consoles are going to be compatible with all sorts of different peripherals and controllers. Anyone placing an order should receive that reimagined classic joystick, as well as receiving a modern controller. That was in that image up here. These are the classic controller, the classic joystick, and the proposed controller. So you should, receive those. What's quite interesting is when you look at, the other retro consoles, the Commodore 64, the NES, the SNES, they're all locked. I mean, you could try to hack them and do some stuff with them, but you could end up destroying them. The Atari VCS is going to be running on a custom Linux operating system, which apparently is going to allow users to add and customize their own software. So that is quite interesting. Pretty neat. What else? Other details, there's nothing really available on it at the moment, but, nostalgia is most certainly big business, so we'll just have to see how it does. I mean, honestly, though, it is quite a bit expensive in my opinion. But hey, if this is a platform that is going to be running Linux as well, and you're going to be able to do different things and possibly play modern games as well. I mean, depending on the hardware that's in there, that's one of the key aspects missing. We don't know the hardware, but the fact that it's saying it's going to be offering 4K resolutions can't be too bad. Now, something that is bad, oh my god, there was, right, I remember last week I'd seen this game being released on Steam, and it was controversial to say the least, and I debated whether or not to speak about it, and at the time I decided, no, you know what, it's just, I don't want to speak about this game at all. But now, fast forward a week, and the game has now been removed. So I think I will talk about it very briefly. So this is from Steamed at Kotaku.com. But, the headline itself, they're all over the place and whatever. But there was a game called Active Shooter that was released last week on Steam. And the game, honestly, in my opinion, was in very poor taste. It was originally flaunted as a SWAT, tactical police shooter type thing. But the game actually gave you the ability to, rather than play as the police, which was still an option, you could do that. You had, as the player, the opportunity to play as a school shooter, right? So, I mean, here you go, just a screenshot with game stats on the side, civilian killed, cops killed. Yeah, not very nice. So, as you can imagine, when this game launched last week on Steam, controversy was huge. An anti-gun violence charity had weighed in. There was news outlets all over the place. You probably saw the headlines. Again, I felt a bit strange talking about the game, but I think now that it's been taken off of Steam, I think I feel a little bit better about talking about it, because it was a game that was just absolute exploitation of one of the most horrible things that can happen in this modern age. And same Valve had also been getting a lot of criticism for even allowing, this game to be on Steam in the first place. But so now, Valve has yanked the game store page completely from Steam, along with every other game from the developer and the publisher. Now, this is where it gets even more interesting, because it turns out the developer had already been booted from Steam once before. Now, what was it? Here's a... Yeah, this developer and publisher is, in fact, a person calling himself... Right, I'll leave out his name, who had previously been removed last fall when he was operating as Interactive and Elusive Team. A Valve rep said in a statement, the rep went on to describe him as a troll who has a history of customer abuse, publishing copyrighted material, and user review manipulation. Whilst Valve was investigating this game, Active Shooter, it actually figured out this guy's real identity and stated that they're not going to do business with people who act like this towards our customers or Valve. It's interesting, and there's a very good kind of subtitle, or little footnote here about it's not just about this game. There's a broader conversation here about Steam's content policies, because on one hand, you don't want to stifle people's creativity, and for many people out there, game devs, this is how they express themselves. In the framed the correct way, a school shooting game could possibly work, but the framing would have to be absolutely spot on. You would have to get it perfect, let's be honest, because anything else just looks like it's glorifying it. I mean, the fact that game allowed you to play as an active shooter on a school campus, it's pretty nasty. And I know you could argue, but we've got military shooters, whatnot, and this, that, and this, and you're right. There's a lot of simulations out there. I think at the current political and social climate, just that type of game just isn't right for right now. I think you'd have to really, really frame it. Whether it's playing just as the police or playing as one of the school kids or something, who making it a survival game, and even then it could be quite traumatic. It's not an easy position to be in, for sure, but I think Steam has made the right decision to pull the game, not just based off that specific game itself, but even now that we know a little bit more about the history of the developer, the guy that made it. So well done, Steam. Right, we all know that E3 is just around the corner, right? Not next week, but kind of. Not next week, but, at the weekend, at the end of next week, about the 9th? Yeah, about the 9th or so, we'll start seeing some of the pre-E3, press conferences and whatnot. So we've got a lot to look forward to. Obviously news about Death Stranding, coming out. We're going to see more stuff about, obviously, Battlefield 5. We're going to be, hearing all this stuff about the Fallout Vault 76. If you'd caught that stream that Bethesda had done, it was amazing, wasn't it? Just trolling everyone for hours with the "please stand by," and then finally we get a little bit of information. Same with the recent leak with Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Most of us, I think, in the gaming industry knew or had heard speculation that we were going to be going to ancient Greece, and sure enough, it seems that is indeed the case. But again, hopefully we'll get more information at E3. Anthem, we should be getting more information. All of these things are just, they're looking great. Going to be really, really interesting to see what is going to happen. But hey, hold on, we're not at E3 yet, because before E3, for all you tech lovers out there, we've of course got Computex. So I grabbed this from Engadget.com. It's just saying what to expect at Computex 2018. Now, for those of you not in the know, because hey, if you're just a gamer, which I don't mean that in a bad way, just a gamer. I mean, if you're a gamer who doesn't really, follow tech news, right? If you're more into the gaming aspect rather than the technology aspect, you might have never even heard of Computex. Well, Computex is the midpoint of the technology calendar, right? They basically, every year, the first week of June in Taipei, Taiwan, they have this huge convention where PC makers, technology companies, startups, all come to show off their next, the next kind of biggest thing. In previous years, virtual reality, new video cards, all these types of things, Computex tends to be the place where these are first unveiled. So it's quite interesting because what usually happens at Computex is we see products that won't necessarily come out this year. We'll a lot of times see prototypes and items that will be, for next year. In addition to that, we will still see some products that are coming out this year, but it's really quite exciting for all of us techies out there. And of course, that impacts us as gamers as well, because, whether it's console stuff or PC stuff or, I don't know, keyboards, mice, controllers, Computex tends to be a place where we will kind of see these things happening. So it hasn't quite really kicked off yet. There's been a few little kind of teasers. And so far it's looking quite cool. Asus is going to be revealing, a new laptop that looks super thin. Looks like it's using all AMD, AMD processor, CPU, and an AMD video card. So that could be quite interesting. Intel has already began shipping its 10nm Cannon Lake processors. So there's a good chance we're going to see some of that at Computex. Acer, which is, another big company that's based in Taiwan, they'll no doubt have quite a few things to show off. Obviously, we covered the other week there that Acer had their new 4K monitor coming out, but they've also got Alexa-equipped laptops, business Chromebooks, and of course, gaming machines. So that could be quite interesting. NVIDIA, don't know what's going to be happening with NVIDIA, because we previously reported that the next generation of NVIDIA cards, where we're expecting to see them hit the streets July or August, and now we don't know, because we see that NVIDIA is, there's what's the name of it? I can't remember. There's a tech conference in August, and, the itinerary for that has came out, and we know that NVIDIA is going to be speaking about the new mainstream cards in August. Whether that means they're not coming out till then or till after then, we don't know. Whether or not NVIDIA's going to have anything new or exciting for us at Computex remains to be seen. If anything, we'll see a whole bunch of products from NVIDIA that are working with partners. Things like the ROG Zephyrus, which is a gaming laptop from Asus, and of course, machines from Razer, MSI, and whatnot. Computex. There's plenty of great YouTubers out there who usually cover these Computex. Linus usually goes. I think they usually try to make it. I know for sure Paul's Hardware, he'll be going. If you haven't watched Paul's Hardware on YouTube, really a well-versed guy in the tech and PC world, that's for sure. He's already over there. They were, I think he flew to Japan a few days back, to hang out there for a little bit before making their way to Taiwan. But yes, Computex, really exciting stuff. And, again, for the tech side of things, this time of year is awesome for me, because there's Computex, there's all sorts of new hardware for me to drool over, and then the week after we go right into E3, where hey, now I can find out about all the gaming stuff. So what else? Well, this is a bit of news that obviously I'm biased about, because I absolutely love Monster Hunter World. I mean, I do. I don't play it religiously anymore. When it first came out, every day I was just dumping the hours in. But now I'm at that point where hunter rank 130 something. I've got almost, I think, about 500 hours in the game, where it's just a case of when something new comes out, I can get on, do a bit of grinding, and it's enjoyable for me. But I don't necessarily play it as much as I did before. But this week, a new update came out for Monster Hunter World, and of course, this added Lunastra, who is the partner in crime, I suppose. Is that one way to look at it? Of Teostra, or Toasty, as we tend to call Teostra in the game. But anyway, this is what kind of blows me away with Monster Hunter World. It's yet another free update. So far, all of these DLCs, all of these new features that they've added, all of these new monsters they've added to hunt, new weapons, new gear, refinements to gameplay, additional quests, all of this stuff has been free. Now, yes, there is paid parts of the game when it comes to the cosmetics, right? If you want emotes and stickers, new outfits for your handler, you can pay for those. But as far as actual gameplay aspects of the game, everything has been free so far. So what all does this update do, right? I mean, okay, it adds Lunastra, and with that comes kind of, I wouldn't say a whole new story, but it does. You have basically a quest, and you've got some new things to do. You get a couple of cool cutscenes that are pretty badass. I mean, I don't want to spoil it for you, but basically, yeah, you get a pretty epic fight sequence, and it's pretty darn cool. The weapons from Lunastra look pretty darn cool. The Palico gear is pretty neat, and it's quite interesting the way they've done the weapons, where basically they've got, I think each weapon class has a rarity 7 weapon you can craft, and then there's 3 rarity 8s that all have different trees. They're kind of half Lunastra and half, whether that's Xeno'jiiva, whether that's Nergigante, but yeah, pretty cool. Lunastra, if you're not familiar with your Monster Hunter World lore, Lunastra is basically the not female version, but, there are a couple, her and Teostra. Toasty is the male, Lunastra is the female. But the fight itself, if you're thinking that Lunastra is just a blue Toasty, you couldn't be, more wrong at all. New fight mechanics, it's a totally different fight. Toasty, which I know some people get quite frustrated with, once you're geared up and you know how to basically fight them, the different kind of tactics to use, as well as the types of mantles and weapon choices, well, not weapon choices, but skills, Toasty becomes a really, really easy fight. Even tempered Toasty, sometimes you have to be careful with the Nova Bomb, but it's not that bad. But Lunastra, wow, just, I didn't faint, which means nothing. It could have just been blind luck, but I did find it challenging. I had a lot of close calls where my health was, just a sliver left. So yeah, really, really good fight. She's nicknamed the Empress of Flame, and when you fight her, you'll soon find out why she has that nickname. Definitely a challenging fight. And so, of course, you'll have plenty of new gear and weapons to try to farm up. So that's always a good thing. You gotta have more stuff, right? I didn't see if there was any new charms or anything. I didn't see anything like that. But there is a new mantle, and this mantle's called the temporal mantle, and I've used it just a little bit. I only played a little bit yesterday. Total game changer. It's pretty ridiculous. It basically, any attack that would do a whole crap load of damage to you, your character automatically evades. Now, sometimes it can be a pain in the ass, especially if you're in the middle of doing something. But, yeah, it's pretty neat. It lasts for, I think, about 90 seconds. Has a cooldown probably of about 300 or so. So very similar to your other mantles, your Rocksteadies and whatnot. But pretty cool. And you'll get that at some point. during your adventures. But it's pretty darn neat. There's also been a whole bunch of other changes and improvements. Again, the game, they keep refining it as time goes on. So now you're going to be able to unlock tempered monster investigations whilst you're hunting tempered monsters and breaking their parts. Remember before you had to do these, a tempered quest and just follow the damn monster around, grabbing the footprints, or, quite often Capcom would put out these special quests where you had to, deliver barrel or something, but there was a lot of kind of tempered tracks all over the place. You had to basically farm for tempered investigations. But now, no, you'll actually be able to get investigations by breaking parts. So rather than feeling you're wasting your time just walking around for an hour gathering tracks, you'll still be able to go out and, kick ass, basically, fight tempered monsters whilst building up investigations at the same time. So that's huge. It makes things much more much more straightforward. And lastly, Capcom has teased it's going to be introducing Arc tempered, or Arch, you know what I mean, like, an Archbishop, right? So Arch tempered Elder Dragons, which are even more powerful variants of the tempered Elder Dragons. So, wow, that's going to be interesting. Tempered Elder Dragons are already, depending on the dragon itself, are challenging. Val Hazak, okay, maybe not so much. But tempered Kushala Diora, yeah, she's, wow, that's not too much fun. Tempered Nergigante, also, if you're not geared, can really cause some issues, that's for sure. So yeah, it's just, Monster Hunter World continues to get better and better as time goes on. And of course, don't forget that later this year, it's going to be out on PC, which I'm really interested to see how that's going to look. So, wow, just holy crap. Looking good, looking good. So, I think we're going to call that for this week. Now, next week is going to be the week before E3, so I think what we're going to do is we'll most likely do like we did last year and have kind of our hopes and expectations for E3. And then that way, it gives us just a chance where really we're not really talking about news. We're just kind of talking about our opinions and what we think or hope is going to come out of E3. And then it's great because then the next week, when E3 is actually going on or starting to wrap up, we'll be able to then compare. If there's anything super cool that's came out of E3, we'll obviously be talking about it. But then at the same time, if we had any kind of call outs or things that we thought we might see and they turn out true, it's a great time to address that. So that's for what's on the cards for the next 2 weeks, doing some E3 stuff. In the meantime, look, hey, thanks for watching. Make sure to check out the rest of scholarlygamers.com. Just this week, the latest episode of Armchair Gaming dropped. Make sure to check that out. The Unbearable Gamer was still in Fortnite Battle Royale, and looking at all sorts of very interesting concepts. I believe duality was one of them. Hey, I don't want to spoil it for you. It's really, such a great series, very, very interesting. You should check it out sometime. And then, of course, next week we should have, we'll have to check the calendar, but it should be an episode of Proof of Console, I do believe, unless I'm mistaken. And hey, in addition to video content, obviously you can catch our reviews and other articles that are out there on the website. And hey, make sure to check out the streamers as well. Remember to just use that hashtag, ScholarlyGamers, looking on Twitter, looking in the Twitch directory. Usually, any of the Scholarly Gamers will be streaming to that community, so search that way as well and, hit that follow button for them. Anyways, folks, we will catch you next week for our pre-E3 kickoff show, and in the meantime, have fun and take care.